This summary explores the flower hunter, the exotic world of floral discoveries. How did the flowers that carry our emotions transform from simple garden plants into global commodities? From breeding and cultivation to sales, what kind of massive industry operates behind the scenes? In our daily lives, from holiday celebrations to expressions of love, flowers play an indispensable role, adding endless beauty and joy. But have you ever wondered, why do we give carnations for Mother's Day? Why do most flowers in a vase have no scent? And why are roses from Ecuador hailed as the pinnacle of quality, commanding such high prices? This look into Flower Confidential will pull back the curtain on the enigmatic world of the flower trade. Calling a flower a commodity sounds terribly unromantic. But did you know that the global cut flower market now has an annual trade value of $40 billion? That's nearly 4 times the total gross of the global film industry. What are cut flowers? They are the blossoms, stems, and leaves cut from plants, essentially everything you see at a typical flower shop, distinct from potted plants. When you bring cut flowers home and place them in water, they usually wilt within a week. The flower industry has since blossomed into a massive, ornate, and captivating business, a flower empire, in every sense of the word. The book's author, Amy Stewart, is a writer with a private garden in Northern California. She has written several books on nature, and her works Wicked Bugs, Wicked Plants, and Flower Confidential have all been New York Times bestsellers. She is also a well-known blogger, a contributing editor for Fine Gardening magazine, and has been featured by media outlets like NPR and ABC, making her a leading expert in the world of plants and flowers. With that introduction to the book and its author, let's dive into the details. The book is clearly structured and filled with vivid, first-hand accounts. We will examine this vast industry from 3 perspectives: the good, the bad, and the beautiful. The good and the beautiful are easy to grasp. Flowers always bring us joy. But what about the bad? Without the author's in-depth investigation, most readers would likely be unaware of the industry's negative impacts, such as environmental pollution and labor exploitation. We will explore these details as we go. The author is concerned not only with the industry's logic and secrets, but also with the welfare of its workers, a humanistic spirit that runs through the entire book. Let's begin with the first part, the good in the flower industry. It can be said that our love for flowers has driven us to better study and understand the laws of nature. So, what improvements have people made to flowers to facilitate their distribution and bring them into countless homes? For millennia, people have cherished flowers, but only in recent centuries have we truly understood their internal structure. In the mid-17th century, a British physician first proposed that while the external beauty of a plant, the flower, pleases humans, its equally intricate internal structure must also benefit the plant itself. He was the first to discover the connection between a flower's anatomy and its reproductive function. It wasn't until the late 17th century that botanists began to speculate that pollen might be equivalent to sperm, a theory that sparked great controversy at the time. In the early 18th century, one scientist countered that discussing sex in relation to flowers was not only scientifically unconvincing but also morally subversive. Fortunately, pragmatic horticulturalists were undeterred and continued their experiments. In the history of flower breeding, the most famous story is the creation of the stargazer lily. The stargazer is now ubiquitous, available in almost every flower shop and considered one of the most common lily varieties. Yet, its birth was a momentous event in the world of horticulture. Lilies are naturally easy to propagate. What breeders do with lilies is no different from what bees and butterflies do. They brush pollen from the stamen of one flower onto the stigma of another. Through this method, they've created hundreds of lily varieties and countless hybrids. In the cut flower industry, the most common are trumpet, Asiatic, and Oriental hybrids. Among them, Oriental lilies have the largest blossoms, most vibrant colors, and strongest fragrance. Unfortunately, their flowers naturally droop downwards, causing the heads to break off easily during harvesting and packaging. This downward-facing shape also clashes with upward-blooming flowers like roses and carnations in bouquets. While Asiatic lilies have many upward-facing varieties and are equally colorful, their flowers are much smaller and have almost no fragrance. Therefore, A long-held dream in the breeding world was to combine the upward-facing trait of the Asiatic lily with the large, vibrant, and fragrant qualities of the Oriental lily. Such a creation would revolutionize the cut lily market. An American named Leslie Woodruff was a traditional flower breeder dedicated to this very goal. He loved flowers and was committed to creating the impossible hybrids that others dismissed. Through tireless effort at his Sun Valley Floral Farms in California, he finally succeeded in breeding a new lily with large, beautiful, upward-facing blooms. His partner named it the Stargazer. In the mid-1970s, it was sent to the Netherlands for growers to evaluate its potential as a cut flower. The Stargazer was a phenomenal success in Holland, quickly becoming the best-selling Oriental lily. Eventually, this perfect flower went global, becoming an affordable variety for the mass market. From the 19th to the 20th century, as more biological information about flowers was decoded, growers on farms continued to innovate, using new techniques to produce taller, straighter flowers that could bloom out of season with flawless petals. Carnations and chrysanthemums were once two of the most popular cut flowers. This wasn't because consumers particularly adored them, but because growers had figured out how to make them bloom year-round. As long as florists could get a steady supply, they could always find a use for them for any occasion or holiday. Besides color and shape, breeders must also balance fragrance and lifespan. One new variety, developed from a lavender rose, was famous for its rich scent. But emitting fragrance consumes a great deal of a flower's energy, shortening its life. As a result, such roses are mostly used for weddings, where they only need to look stunning for a day. No one demands a long vase life. However, most flowers on the market are actually scentless. In the breeding process, traits like survival time, shipping durability, and perfect appearance are prioritized, while fragrance is lost in the trade-offs. Lab research has confirmed what traditional breeders discovered. As a flower's vase life increases, its scent diminishes. So what does that smell when we walk into a flower shop? Only a small part is natural floral fragrance. The rest may be the result of florists' tricks, like using scented sprays or the smell released by the preservatives in the floral water. After 1920, the discovery of photoperiodism brought a major revolution to the cut flower industry. Scientists found that a plant's need for darkness to flower is even greater than its need for light. For example, if a plant requires 16 hours of light and 8 hours of darkness to bloom, it won't flower at all in a lab if the cycle is changed to 16 hours of light and 4 hours of darkness. Another major discovery was the effect of diurnal temperature difference (DIF) on plant height. When the daytime temperature is lower than the nighttime temperature, this negative DIF environment causes plants to grow shorter, making them ideal for small bouquets and potted plants. These two discoveries gave growers greater control over the timing and size of flowering plants. However, people soon realized that manipulating light and temperature to produce ideal flowers was extremely expensive. The cost of artificial lighting, heating, and cooling systems was enormous. With transportation becoming more advanced, it was cheaper to find a growing location with a more suitable climate than to invest heavily in these systems. Before the 20th century, most growers cultivated flowers in or near large cities because many flowers couldn't withstand long-distance transport, and refrigerated preservation technology didn't exist yet. The American flower industry originated on the East Coast, but with the development of the railroad in the 20th century, people began growing flowers like lilies and tulips on the climatically suitable West Coast and shipping them in bulk across the country using the expanding transportation network. This is how Humboldt County, California, became the lily capital. In addition to the favorable climate, California's large immigrant population provided an ample labor force for flower growers. This concludes our first section, the good aspects of the flower industry. A love for flowers has advanced human understanding of nature, giving rise to new breeding techniques, more advanced greenhouses, and a globalized transportation system that ultimately brings stunning flowers into our lives. Today, we can buy a wide variety of beautiful and affordable flowers year-round. Now that we've covered the good, let's look at the bad aspects. First, the breeding process in the modern flower industry is inherently ironic. A flower is a plant's reproductive organ, yet humans want it to stop serving its original function. A flower's fundamental purpose is to either reproduce or die. We, however, prefer flowers that don't drop pollen, or better yet, produce no pollen at all. We want a fragrance that doesn't attract bees. And we want them to last as long as possible in a vase. Modern flowers have become more obedient, easier to grow, and less seasonal. But at the same time, they have lost the very character and vigor a plant should possess. People have used every scientific and technological means available to make flowers less like flowers. Ultimately, a flower's traits, longevity versus scent, color versus shape, are all balanced and compromised based on market demand. Flowers have lost their original fragrance in exchange for a longer vase life. They've sacrificed their individuality for the ability to travel long distances and the miracle of blooming in the dead of winter. Furthermore, the very people who made enormous contributions to the flower industry may not have received their due rewards. Remember the famous stargazer lily we mentioned earlier? This lily generated millions of dollars in revenue, but unfortunately its creator, Leslie Woodruff, did not get rich from it. Lacking business acumen and with a deteriorating relationship with his partner, Woodruff sold all his lily varieties for a mere $1,000. In his later years, Woodruff was diagnosed with cancer and lived in bleak circumstances. Fortunately, the Dutch growers who had profited handsomely from the stargazer lily were grateful to him. Upon learning of his situation, they raised money for him and, in the early 1990s, awarded him a medal from the Royal General Bulb Growers Association of Holland. Woodruff passed away in 1997. His daughter suspects that the cancers that killed both her father and her sister were due to their unprotected use of pesticides in the greenhouse. Their love for lilies came at a heavy price. Moreover, it's surprising that flower prices have changed very little in over a century. The rule of thumb in this industry is that the grower receives about 1/10 of the consumer's purchase price. In other words, if a grower earns $1 from a bouquet of roses, its retail price is likely between $10 and $12. To gain a deeper understanding of the trade, the author conducted field research in 3 representative growing regions: Sun Valley in California, the Netherlands, and Ecuador in South America. Interestingly, though all are involved in the cultivation stage of the flower industry, these 3 locations present vastly different industrial landscapes. California's Sun Valley Floral Farms employs 500 workers and looks more like a chocolate factory, full of machinery and warehouses with a high degree of automation. The flowers live a short, pampered life in greenhouses. In most cases, they don't even root in soil. Their pots are filled mainly with shredded coconut fiber. Pests are blocked by fine mesh on vents or eliminated by sticky traps and pesticides. However, an intern from the Netherlands still commented that, compared to Dutch standards, the operations here were quite primitive. In the Netherlands, labor costs are high, whereas in California, they can hire more workers and use less machinery. The Netherlands is, without a doubt, a legend in the flower industry. Collectors first brought tulips from Turkey to Holland, and the locals were instantly captivated. Today, the Dutch flower industry has been a global force for 400 years. It's fair to say the Dutch have calmly dominated the entire flower business. Over the last century, as the industry's center of gravity shifted first to the United States, and then toward Africa and Latin America with their ideal climates and abundant labor, the Dutch adapted once again, moving from cultivation to exporting knowledge and technology. Strict immigration policies also forced the Dutch to replace manual labor with more advanced technology. At a large Dutch flower farm the author visited, there were only 75 employees in total, with just 1 or 2 workers per greenhouse. They are even researching ways to use machines for direct planting and harvesting. For instance, they've bred a thornless rose, not for the delicate hands of a bride, but for the convenience of cultivation. Thornless roses move better on conveyor belts and can be bundled twice as fast as their thorny counterparts. It's also worth noting that besides cultivation technology, the Dutch lead global floral design and fashion. Should yellow chrysanthemums be paired with pale green poppy pods, or should coxcomb be entwined with blackberry vines? The newest, most fashionable combinations always appear first in Amsterdam before sweeping the globe. As we just mentioned, the Netherlands is the birthplace of the flower industry. However, even Dutch ingenuity cannot compete with the perfect climate, vast cheap labor force, and relatively lax government regulations of Africa and Latin America. After visiting California and the Netherlands, the author traveled to Quito, the capital of the South American nation of Ecuador, to witness the master aggregator of the flower trade. The flower trade has become a dominant industry in this small country, second only to oil and bananas. The most famous flower produced in Ecuador is the rose. The roses grown there have heads the size of baseballs and boast vibrant colors. Today, in the U.S., many high-end floral brands sell Ecuadorian roses. Most of these are exported to the United States, with another 15% going to Europe. Similar to other industries, the exploitation of third-world labor is also rampant in the flower business. On one hand, the industry creates job opportunities for Ecuadorians, stimulates local economic growth, and allows locals to avoid migrating for work. On the other hand, work on flower farms involves low pay and high intensity. A vast amount of chemicals are used in cultivation, yet only 22% of workers have received relevant training. Workers often operate with rudimentary gas masks or no protection at all. Agricultural wastewater discharge also poses a significant environmental threat, with the flower cultivation industry potentially causing severe damage to the nation's natural resources. Furthermore, because workers are dispersed in greenhouses, female workers are vulnerable to sexual harassment from colleagues and supervisors. In one survey of 100 female flower company workers, over half reported experiencing some form of sexual harassment. For these reasons, some media outlets have dubbed Ecuadorian roses blood roses, calling for people to confront the labor exploitation, industry injustice, and environmental pollution behind the beautiful facade of the flower industry. This concludes the second aspect. Behind this seemingly beautiful and romantic industry lie hidden issues such as the artificial alteration of natural species, labor exploitation, and environmental pollution. We've discussed the good side of the flower industry, focusing on botanical progress and transportation technology, and we've dissected the bad side through examples from California, the Netherlands, and Ecuador, revealing the darker aspects of the business. Now, let's look at the third part, the beautiful side of the flower industry. How do people use flowers to express emotions, even inventing holidays to exchange them? Every day, cargo planes fly from Quito, Ecuador, transporting huge shipments of roses to Miami, USA. The author took one such flight. Miami has the primary port of entry airport and free trade zone for imported roses. 88% of all imported flowers to the U.S. pass through this airport. Over 6,000 people in the city are employed in related jobs. For the Ecuadorian workers earning just $6 or $7 a day, the Miami airport might seem a world away, but the flowers they grow can enter that other world in just a few short hours. After leaving the airport, the flowers enter a vast network of importers, exporters, freight owners, distributors, auctioneers, wholesalers, and retailers. Imagine a shipment of roses destined for Manhattan, New York. On Monday, they are harvested and packed in Ecuador. They are then stored in cold conditions, just above freezing, for 24 hours. On Wednesday, they arrive at the Miami airport, undergo a quick inspection, and are shipped out by road the same day. 24 hours later, by Friday morning, these beautiful Ecuadorian roses can be found in flower shops big and small across Manhattan. The author arrived in Miami just 10 days before Valentine's Day, the absolute peak for flower shipments. Mother's Day is also noteworthy. The total volume of flower shipments is actually higher for Mother's Day. For Valentine's Day, most people only send flowers to one sweetheart. But Mother's Day is different. Think about it, your mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother all need a bouquet. If you have children, you also have to send one to your wife on their behalf. For workers, however, the burden of Mother's Day is lighter and not as frantic as Valentine's. That's because Valentine's Day is extremely time-sensitive. Flowers for a loved one must arrive on February 14th. If they're delayed until the 15th, you might have to buy diamonds or other expensive gifts to make amends. But mothers are different. They are happy to receive flowers whenever they arrive. What many don't know is that Mother's Day was actually invented by florists. Mother's Day began in 1908 when a woman named Anna Jarvis wrote to public figures suggesting the creation of a holiday for mothers, setting the date on the second Sunday in May, the anniversary of her own mother's death. She urged florists to take action, encouraging children to wear a white carnation on their lapel to honor their mothers. Flowers were cheap and plentiful this time of year, and florists saw it as a brilliant business opportunity and eagerly responded. This is the origin of giving carnations for Mother's Day. Hearing this, do you feel a bit like you've been marketed to? Perhaps. But even if it's a marketing ploy, we still gladly give carnations on Mother's Day and roses on Valentine's Day, don't we? In addition to the retail sales we've discussed, there is another famous sales method in the flower trade, the Dutch flower auction. In contrast to the flowers shipped out from Miami Airport in all directions, the Dutch flower auction brings all the flowers to a small town called Aalsmeer. Located near the capital, Amsterdam, this small town is the world's largest flower trading center. Most of the flowers sold in the European market, including those destined for Russia, China, and Japan, are traded here, accounting for 1/5 of the world's total volume. Here's another term to know: the Dutch auction system. About half of the world's cut flowers are supplied to the global market through this system. The Dutch auction originated in 1911 when a group of growers came up with the idea in a cafe on the outskirts of Amsterdam. They hoped to gain more control over flower pricing and sales by holding an auction. This type of auction is also known as a descending price auction. The auction clock starts at a very high price and runs backward until someone is willing to bid. It's a game of speed, all about getting the goods at the right price before anyone else. However, the process is peculiar. Even today, people still go to great lengths to transport highly perishable flowers to the Aalsmeer auction house to be sold before shipping them to their final destination. Why go through the time-consuming and laborious process of auctioning in the Netherlands? One possible reason is that it facilitates the centralized display, evaluation, and selection of flowers. Another is the strict quality control inspection conducted by a completely neutral third party. The Dutch auction is a century-old industry tradition, and flower markets around the world watch it closely, viewing it as the bellwether of the flower trade. So far, we've focused on the sales side of flowers, from how a rose gets from a South American plantation to Manhattan to the historic Dutch auction system. You should now have a general understanding of how flowers get to you. People buy thousands upon thousands of flowers every day. The entire industry has made tremendous efforts to cultivate better varieties. As a result, we now have blue roses, pollen-free lilies, and Gerbera daisies that can last for 20 days in a vase. Whether or not these flowers truly make our lives better, they have always been vessels for human emotion. On a day in February 2004, the mayor of San Francisco announced that the city would begin performing weddings for same-sex couples at City Hall. Countless people were moved. Those who couldn't be there in person to witness the joyous events began to express their well wishes with flowers. They ordered bouquets from florists, addressed only to a happy couple, and asked the shops to deliver them to any couple waiting in line to be married. The documentary Flowers from the Heart tells this very story. The director interviewed some of the people who sent flowers, including heterosexuals, gay people, parents, and grandparents. They all felt that only flowers could express what they wanted to say to the newlyweds. They weren't political activists and didn't want to make a statement. They simply wanted those couples to know that someone was wishing them happiness. And with that, we have shared the industry secrets from Amy Stewart's Flower Confidential. We've explored 3 aspects of the flower industry: the good, the bad, and the beautiful. This massive industry has led to the global circulation of flowers, but it has also brought many unforeseen consequences. First, the flower itself has been changed. A century ago, most flowers sold in the United States were grown domestically. Now, 3/4 of the flowers Americans consume are imported, mostly from Latin America. Flowers have been bred to be better for transport and to have a longer vase life, but they have lost their scent and character in the process. Second, as transportation developed, the pursuit of lower costs caused the flower industry to shift from the Netherlands to the United States, and then to countries around the equator, mainly in Africa and Latin America. The flower industry brought development opportunities to these countries, but it also brought problems like worker exploitation and environmental pollution. Flower Confidential was finalized in 2007, so some of the data in the book may be slightly outdated, and it doesn't cover a crucial component of today's flower trade: e-commerce. However, the author's deep understanding of flowers and her unique perspective in analyzing the industry give us a complete picture of the massive supply chain and operational methods behind this commodity. Today, Chinese growers are also gradually entering the international flower trade. The Kunming flower market is on the rise, reaching most of Asia with its increasingly sophisticated logistics. The development of e-commerce and the internet has made buying flowers more convenient than ever for city dwellers. The global floral landscape has likely undergone even greater changes than the flower empire described by the author around 2005. This is an industry full of vitality, with new changes every day. But no matter what, flowers will always be a special commodity. What a bouquet carries most are the myriad emotions people wish to express to one another.